This is Dario and I'm Tony, and we've had the incredible opportunity to sit down with the US Trade Representative, Ambassador Tai, and discuss how US and Uzbek trade relations are going to be growing within the next couple of years. Just last year we had the first C5+1 meeting take place in Washington, D.C., and now we've had US trade representatives come through to Uzbekistan and the region to talk about boosting these relations.
Well, it was a real honor to be able to meet the president. We talked about the clear political will that the president has and Uzbekistan has demonstrated to reform the economy, to make it more market-oriented, and his vision for a new Uzbekistan that will be more connected, more modern, and that will provide more economic opportunities for Uzbekistan's people. I thought that it was a very positive meeting. I think that the signals that we have seen in terms of the reforms, in terms of Uzbekistan's work to join the WTO, the willingness to make the reforms necessary, is a really positive sign. On the bilateral front as well, we see progress on intellectual property rights enforcement. We see really significant progress, important progress in the cotton sector to change the entire economy, to try to eliminate forced labor and child labor in a system that has existed for so long. All of these types of changes indicate to us a positive momentum for reform that will enable a deepening of the US and Uzbekistan trade relationship too. So Uzbekistan's WTO accession efforts have been going on for a very long time, but we have seen that the appointment of the new chief negotiator has really accelerated the work and also intensified the diligence of the Uzbek government to engage with the WTO members, to engage with the hard issues that require internal and domestic reform here. And there's a lot of very good progress. So the United States and USTR, my agency, stands ready and committed to continue to work with Uzbekistan on this WTO accession. So we talked about this as well, and the challenge of having so many state-owned enterprises, as you describe, monopolies, dominating in the economy. It is certainly not going to be easy, but it is very clear that the president is focused on advancing economic opportunities here, ensuring that there can be competition so that Uzbekistan's companies can produce more innovative and competitive products, and so that Uzbekistan can become a more positive environment, including for foreign investment. So I appreciate the complexity and the difficulty of this kind of privatization reform. But I also appreciate that the president understands how important it is to the success of Uzbekistan integrating into the world economy.
So you touched on the topic that I would like to ask. My name is Tony Kruger and I'm with Dario News. And you mentioned foreign trade. Now, for the last couple of years, the US has not yet made it into the top 10 trading partners, not only for Uzbekistan, but for Central Asia as a whole. What do you see as being the biggest obstacles for that trade to be easier to facilitate?
So, as you may know, my title is United States Trade Representative. Yeah. So I'm going to start there because that is actually my job, the job of my agency, which is to represent the United States in matters of international trade. The statistics are very interesting to look at. We have grown our trade with Uzbekistan and with the region. But I think that maybe the most significant challenge that we have is geography. when you look at Uzbekistan, you appreciate that this is a double landlocked country, and then you look at the neighborhood where all of you live. It's a tough neighborhood. There are many challenges, logistical and also geopolitical. But what I've seen from counterparts here, the trade minister, the deputy prime minister, First Secretary Saida, I see a team of Uzbek government officials who are thinking about Uzbekistan's opportunities very strategically, who are looking to diversify Uzbekistan's trade relationships. And later this week, I will be meeting with Uzbekistan again in the context of the US Central Asia Trade and Investment Framework Agreement Council meeting, the TIFA meeting. And that will be an opportunity for the United States to engage with all 5 members of the Central Asian region to look at how the United States can support the economic integration between the countries here, but also where are the opportunities for us to grow the relationship between the United States and the region.
What areas do you think of growth there could be?
Well, I think that there are going to be many different types of opportunities. One that I know that Uzbekistan's very interested in relates to tourism and services here. I think that the region has a very deep and rich history, and that's certainly an area that we can look at. I also know that the region is very blessed in natural resources like critical minerals. I know that this is something that is considered a strategic supply chain opportunity. The United States, USTR, my agency, is currently engaged in an initiative to study supply chain resilience, to try to develop tools for trading arrangements that can enhance strategic supply chain resilience. And I think that critical minerals is one example of a potential opportunity where the United States and the countries in the region can think about how we can develop our trade relationships to further the resilience of this important supply chain.
Thank you.
I actually think that our engagement with the region has been positive. The desire to diversify trading relationships means that the challenge for the countries in this region will be to try not to violate sanctions. And it can be quite challenging because of the historical trade relationships here. But so far, I've heard strong commitments to respecting the Western sanctions, the US sanctions, in order to keep as many options open for developing trade relationships here as possible.
I wanted to touch on, you mentioned the geopolitical climate here, and that being one of the hindrances to trade. And we do have the middle corridor coming through as an alternative to the northern trade routes through Russia, and there's also the possibility of a southern route through Afghanistan. How do you see these possibly helping to facilitate the trade between the US and Uzbekistan?
So just so you know, my agency is more about the creation of the rules as opposed to the operationalization of the logistics. So,
well then what rules could we perhaps get in play to help create safe trading routes through these areas?
So again, I think that the rules that we create generally create incentives and disincentives for the actors in the economy. In terms of the logistics and the infrastructure challenges, those are less the purview of my agency, but I would say that I very much understand that in order to trade, you need to have pathways. We have had good conversations, and I know that my partners in the US government are very focused on working with Uzbekistan, including where we can provide capacity building or assistance to develop logistical capabilities that can be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, because also like with regard to the rules behind it, I know Afghanistan is not on everybody's happy list at the moment.
Stable, yeah.
And it's becoming more stable in terms of economy. But in other aspects, not so much. And I know that would be one of the hindrances to using that southern route. But now you mentioned about the rules and regulations. I want to touch a bit on the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. And how do you see any recent developments within this amendment, how it relates to the Central Asian states and US Central Asian trade? And are there any movements forward on, because I know there was some debate in Congress about this amendment, and do you have any insights on that?
So just to take a step back to explain what Jackson-Vanik is, Jackson-Vanik is a US law that regulates US trade with the former communist, former Soviet countries. And as these countries join the WTO, the question is presented around essentially granting permanent normal trading relations. First, this is a congressional action. It's something that Congress needs to do. So as we work with Uzbekistan on the requirements for WTO accession, the question will eventually be presented to the US Congress. If I know what's good for me, as the US trade representative, I know that I should never speak on behalf of the US Congress. The US Congress has its own mind, has its own logic. So out of respect, what I would say is this is really a matter for the US Congress. We will continue to work with Uzbekistan on its WTO accession, and we will continue to engage with the US Congress on taking the steps that it needs to when it feels that the timing is right.
This is somewhat related to the policies, and that is in the light of the current political climate in the world. And the world is quite divided right now between the Ukraine-Russia war, Israel-Palestinian conflict. Uzbekistan has taken a very neutral policy towards everything. How does this then impact relations and moving forward with perhaps trade and coming up with regulations around trade?
You know, I think there are a couple different dimensions to this. One is Uzbekistan's place in the multilateral trading system, and that has to do with the WTO accession. And obviously we'll continue to work with Uzbekistan and support in terms of reforms and the negotiations. There's also the bilateral relationship between the United States and Uzbekistan. And I think that this is a really important area for us to explore and to look for strategic opportunities to deepen. There is absolutely no question that the world keeps getting more complicated every single month. Just when you think it can't get more complicated, it seems like it becomes more complicated. And in this time, it is really important for us to be able to have more agile, more strategic, and more honest relationships with our trading partners. And that is a large part of the reason why I wanted to come to Central Asia and to come visit Uzbekistan. Just going to talk a little bit about the history, and I was reminded you have 3,000 years of incredible history. In an earlier time in history, you were the center of globalization and world trade. You have it in your culture and in your history. And I think that as we look at all the changes happening around the world now, as the United States Trade Representative, I'm very interested in coming to Uzbekistan, understanding better your country, this region, and thinking deeply about how we can unlock the opportunities to make more connections to more different parts of the world. I think we used to think that more trade would lead to more peace and prosperity. What we have seen in the last couple of years is even in a world that is connected by a lot of trade, doesn't guarantee peace and prosperity. So we're at a time when we need to innovate in the way that we think about trade policy. We probably need some new ideas. In order to bring about those new trade policies, we need to have more partners, and more partners who share our vision. And that begins with better understanding each other. So I'm really glad you asked that question, because it allows me to talk about how excited I am to be here, to learn about the region, to learn about Uzbekistan, and really to understand better the history and the opportunity that all of you represent.
What is evident from our discussions is that the emphasis on honest, strategic, and agile relations between nations is the key to having a world that will hopefully become more interconnected through trade, through talks, through friendship. Let's watch how Uzbekistan and the United States keep growing together.